Hi, I think that's us live. Welcome, everyone. So good to see our panelists here. Well, hopefully many of you that I can't see, but welcome. And thank you so much for joining us. So my name is Solène, and I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Lead for Young Innovators at Innovate KTN. I just wanted to start this by giving you just a little bit of an introduction about the Young Innovators program, in case you're not familiar with it. In the meantime, like Saskia just has done in the chat, if you'd like to say hello to each other and tell us where you're joining from, that would be fantastic. So the Young Innovators program was started by Innovate UK as a way to increase diversity and inclusion in innovation and to encourage young people to go ahead and innovate and really bring their ideas to life. The program provides funding, £5,000 of grant funding, plus 2 days of living allowance, plus one-to-one mentorship as well, provided by Innovate K Edge. So it's a fantastic program, and so far we've had 3 cohorts, 24, 64, and 63. And there's going to be another competition opening in June. So if you're interested to find out more, I'll share the program page in the chat shortly. And you can also join the newsletter, so you'll be aware as soon as we open the new competition. We're also looking to expand and help more young people, beyond our cohort in the community. And that's why we are coming up with these events. These are our free funding and investment webinars. We had one last week, and this is the second one. So very excited to have this second conversation with our investors here today. Just a practical note about today. There's the chat, so you can use that to say hello and say where you're from. There's the Q&A function as well at the bottom of your screen. Please use that to drop all of your questions. Just drop them in as they come, and at the end we'll have 10-15 minutes where we'll go through them and pose them around the room. We are recording today, so we'll be sharing the recording on our YouTube channel. So afterwards, if you want to share it, if you enjoyed the event and want to share it with your community, that would be wonderful. There's also the live transcript function at the bottom. So if you need the subtitles, especially to understand my accent, for example, feel free to enable those just by clicking on the little CC icon at the bottom. If you have any tech issues, we have Chloe who's helping us in the background. So just feel free to private message her directly, and she'll be able to help you out. That's it on the technical things. So I'm now going to hand over to the wonderful Emma, who is the person who came up with this idea of talking about funding and investment, because we have received so many questions about this topic from a lot of you and from a lot of people in the community. And Emma is the perfect person to be hosting the conversation today, because she has a wealth and breadth of experience with investment and funding for more than a decade. And she's going to introduce herself and take us through the panel conversation. Over to you, Emma.
Great, Solène, thank you so much, and thank you also to our panel members that we'll be talking to later. So what I want to do today is just share a little bit, and it won't be done by PowerPoint, I promise, just a few thoughts on my thoughts on investment and where to go and find those investors, and making sure that you are prepared for that funding journey. So as Solène mentioned, I'm an innovation growth specialist over at Innovate UK Edge, and also a scale-up director, so helping sort of larger companies grow and looking at a particular focus with regards to funding. I also just have to note as well, I've got sunglasses on my head. It's not because I'm trying to be cool, it's because I've just come back from the hospital and they've just put these horrible things in my eyes. So forgive me if I need to put my sunglasses on. It's just to block the light out, but I'll try and do it for the foreseeable, but I just wanted to put it out there while I'm talking. So while you prepared for your funding journey, we've had part one, and that was talking to founders that have raised funding or on the funding journey. And today we're going to be talking to the investor community. What are they looking for? What are they wanting to see in your investment proposition? So I'm going to quickly take you through my thoughts. And you ask 10 different people, you're going to get 10 different answers in this sort of funding world, but there are some commonalities and some things that I have seen over the last sort of 10, 15 years working in this arena. And I used to work particularly with early stage companies and startups, potentially also pre-revenue companies. So we know this sort of first tranche of funding can be very hard for people. So where to find investors is what we're going to be talking about today. But what I wanted to do is just sort of put a little quick preamble of what's an investor looking for, whether they're an angel investor, whether they're VC or fund, as you go through the sort of funding journey. All I can say is be prepared, prepare. Because, the more you can do with regards to preparation before you go and talk to an investor, the more credibility you're going to have when you're talking to them. And I always say, if you're going for 100,000 or if you're going for £1 million or £5 million, whatever the amount is, if you were trying to win a contract worth that value, you would put a lot of effort into it. So I'm saying actually equity funding and preparing for equity funding is no different. You've got to get all your things in order and make sure that you are prepared to go and talk to investors and tell them about the things that they will be interested in about your investment opportunity. Typically, they're looking for a fabulous team. So, if you're a solo founder, try finding people that you can collaborate with. You might not necessarily have money in order to pay them, but they might come in for sweat equity, or they might come in, just to sort of help you. Is building that great team, that credible sort of group that's then going to take this proposition forward. So, that's something that I would say is very important. Creating a credible investment opportunity. So here's what I mean is, thinking through what you're actually preparing, the documents you're preparing for an investor, and making sure you're very clear about what that opportunity is. And it shouldn't be sort of 90% about your product or service and 10% about the investment. PS, we'd like £500,000 for 10% of the company. You need to build that investment thread all the way through. A well thought through proposition. So, what verticals are you going for? What industry are you disrupting? All those sorts of things we've really got to try and think about with regards to your investment proposition. The ability to scale. So investors aren't typically interested in lifestyle businesses. They want something that actually has the ability to scale, hopefully internationalize at some point in the future. And you need to show that and demonstrate that what you have is actually able to scale and grow. Obviously, something unique and disruptive. They don't want something that's an also-ran. What is the problem? Are you really solving the problem that that is being found? You found that that's out there. So having something different. If you've got IP within the business, that can be very valuable. But if not, are you going to be having that first mover advantage? And do you have something that is unique? Simplicity. I've seen so many investment decks where they put acres and acres of information and they don't simplify the proposition. So when an investor is looking at your investment deck for the first time, you don't want to have it littered with acronyms and detail about your industry, because they might not necessarily know. So keeping it simple, especially in the early stages of talking to investors, they will want to delve deep into the proposition, but keeping it simple to start with is very important. And then ultimately, they're putting money in, they've got to get money out. So what's the return on investment? What's in it for them? We've got some great investors on the panel, and I think Mandy's one of them. They are interested in, the green issues, the green credentials, all those sorts of things. And you can get philanthropic investors as well. But you've got to think about what's in it for the investor and how they're actually going to see their return on investment. Then looking at what you're trying to do. So you collated your marketing plan for the investor traction. And like I mentioned, think about it like that. It is sort of marketing your investment opportunity. So you've got your personal networks. Some jokingly say it's your friends, fools, and family. So what I would say is actually walk around your house for the next couple of weeks and write down all the people you've ever come into contact with, and then go and link in with them, and then go and talk to them. Because actually you'll be amazed, the people that you know might not necessarily be investors, but they might potentially know somebody that could be of interest to you. And it's better to have a warm introduction than trying to trawl the internet to try and sort of find infos out. That doesn't work so well. You've got angel investors, high net worths and ultra high net worths. They generally go into investor groups and into sort of syndicates. So you've got the UK British Angels Association is a great resource to go and find those groups. Some have sector specific investment opportunities that they're looking for, or some are sector agnostic. So it's just trying to find those groups and, you know, go and present to them. And there can be sometimes a small cost to do introductions to investor groups. Then you've got crowdfunding platforms. I could talk all day about crowdfunding platforms. It's not as easy as getting your proposition, sticking it on a platform and expecting the crowd to come in. Generally, they'll want you to have some money committed, typically something in the region of 40% of the raise. So if you're raising £1 million, they want £400,000 committed. And you have to take your own crowd there. So you've got to make sure that you have a very good sort of social networking, and also lots of people that you can actually sort of encourage to come to the crowdfunding platform, because again, it won't be all about the crowd the crowdfunding platform's got. You've got to bring your own crowd too. LinkedIn is a great resource. Like I mentioned, you know, that personal networks, go and link in with lots of people and talk to lots of people, but don't have blanket emails, because generally that's not going to be, you know, people are not going to take kindly to that. But find something that they are interested in their sector and try and sort of start to communicate with that. You've got the Tier 1 investment scheme that is for international investors to come into the UK. And they can, by investing in a UK-based company and taking on a position there, they can actually gain access to a visa to stay in the UK. You've got Angel Investment Network and DexSender. They are two well-respected crowdfunding platforms that you can, not crowdfunding platforms, sorry, investment platforms that you can put your investment opportunity onto. Angel Investment Network, there is a charge to put that on, but it's well respected, and DexSender is free. So in some cases, you might want to put it on DexSender first and see how that goes. VCs and funds, now they are quite easy to find on the internet, and they generally have what their sector is that they're wanting to gain investment opportunities from. But generally, VCs particularly, and larger funds, they want more traction. So they're not going to be necessarily in the angel space, sort of the very, very early stage. They're going to be sort of your later phases of funding as you go through the sort of seed, upper seed, Series A, etc. Family offices, fabulous people, very hard to find. They are great, but they do keep themselves to themselves. But once you can try and sort of talk to family offices. Once they like your opportunity, they have very deep pockets, and they will potentially be with you on a longer funding journey. But as I say, they are very hard to come by, and you don't often come across them very much. Bowhurst is something that we have at Innovate UK Edge. It's a sort of a database, if you like. You can create a profile of your company, and then it can help you look at similar companies at similar stages and what they've raised, but also to sort of gain intelligence. But what it also can do, it can actually pull you an investor list off. I will say that they are probably more funds than individual people, but it's a great resource if that's something that you would be interested in. I've put Companies House because sometimes you might know of a company. This happened with a whiskey company we were working with, raising some money. There was another alcoholic drink raise that was going on at the same time. And then when we looked on Companies House, you can actually see the people that had invested in this other proposition. And sometimes they come back to LinkedIn, you can then go and find those people, start a conversation, and they could be interested in your proposition. So, it's another way of weaving and getting people. I've put Seed Legals on there in brackets, and they're not an investor, but they are a fabulous platform that have lots of free resources, free seminars about the investment world. And if you are wanting to collate term sheets and looking at your investment opportunity, from an investor's point of view with regards to the paperwork, they are a very good resource, and I would urge you, if you are fundraising, to perhaps take a look at Seed Legal, because they have, as I say, great free resources. So that's really the end of my PowerPoint. I'm now going to welcome our investor panel. Thank you so much.
Sorry, just before you transition to the panel, there's a question that's come to the panelists and host chat. What are family offices exactly?
Okay, so they are families that have private wealth, and they are basically there to, sometimes they have offices. They will put money into investment opportunities. So, the big families of, I don't know, can't think of one off the top of my head, but, they've got a lot of private wealth, and they act as their own fund, if you like. And they generally, they're quite risk averse, but as I say, they've got deep pockets, and once you're in with them, they potentially will stay with you for a long time. But I'm sure our investor panel will be able to share as well their thoughts on the various aspects of talking to family offices. Good, that's great. So without further ado, I managed to get through that putting my sunglasses on, so that's good. We're now going to go round our panel, and they're going to make an introduction to themselves and a little bit about what their investor appetite is, if you like, the things that they're interested in. And then I shall ask them some questions about, the investor community, what's happening in the world of investment at the moment, and get their feedback. And then we'll have sort of Q&A for the last 15 minutes. We had lots of questions last time, didn't we, Selene? So I'll try and leave a little bit more time for our questions. So Mandy, as you're the one next to me, perhaps we can go over to you, and then we'll go around the room.
Yeah, sure. I'm really pleased to be here talking to everyone today. I'm Mandy Nyarko. I am the co-founder of an organization called Startup Discovery School. Essentially what we do is we design incubator and accelerator programs that are aligned to sustainability narratives and diversity narratives as well. I'm also an angel investor, so I invest in diverse entrepreneurs aligned to the UN sustainability goals. So typically looking at investing or backing more female founders or people of color, and those from low socioeconomic backgrounds, because those are, I guess, identities that I identify with as well. But looking particularly at some of the goals around reducing inequality, the climate action, responsible consumption, and wider issues concerning the way that we treat our planet. So, and I guess my why, I'm interested in sustainability. I'm interested in the future of the planet. I'm Ghanaian by heritage. I was born in the UK, but my parents are from Ghana. And issues such as natural capital interference is really close to me. A lot of my family or family members rely on those natural systems for food, etc. So, just being able to be part of the disruption of maintaining how we treat our planet and, issues around that is something that matters to me. So that's kind of where I focus my efforts. I'm also a venture partner in a fund called Ada Ventures. It's a $50 million fund that focuses on backing underrepresented entrepreneurs with bold ideas.
Fabulous. Thanks, Mandy. That's super. Dee, perhaps we can hear from you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tahana. I'm ex-investment banker. So I've seen the transactions like small to the big. And 6 or 7 years ago, I stepped out. In the meantime, we set up M&A, which is focused on emerging technologies and non-organic growth of technology companies. We worked with a number of startups, but as part of it, we also do, as partners do the angel investing. Me particularly, I'm interested in fintechs. I'm very much focused on also supporting underprivileged founders. I'm part of Founder Vine, and I try to do my part of the work wherever I can. I sit on a panel of grant approvals of science technology parks. So this is the Swiss government. I work also on investor relations within EU funded programs. So a lot of caps, but mostly everything goes around the transactions, and we have a wealth of experience. We've done transactions, small and the big. So, and I have to give the credit to Sid Legals, Emma. I think it's one of the best companies you can find to give you the legal support as early stage startup. I love what they're doing. I mean, honestly, they're taking tens and tens of thousands of pounds from your budget for the legal support. So it is not a paid advertising. It's really something I'm impressed with.
Absolutely. No, I came up, well, Anthony Rose, I know the guy who founded it, and he's great. He's prolific on LinkedIn, always got
amazing what they're doing for startups. Really amazing.
Yeah. And then they do provide a great insight. So yes, we're doing an advert, but they are very good. Anyhow, Harvey, perhaps we could hear from you. That'd be great.
Thanks, Emma. Nice to meet everyone. My name's Harvey Knight. I'm the co-founder of Sustainable Network. We're a founders first ecosystem, providing a number of support services for founders. Our core activity is supporting, helping founders raise capital. And we do this in various different ways. We've got an FCA direct investment platform where we can arrange direct investments. We're also in the process of setting up our own angel syndicate, and in the process of launching an EIS fund as well. We support companies from all types of sectors. Obviously, sustainability is our core focus. We focus around in particular areas in climate tech, sustainable infrastructure, regenerative agriculture, health tech, clean transportation, and food tech. We want to provide more than just, funding for founders. So we support companies on gaining sustainability accreditations such as B Corp. We're in the process of going through the B Corp process ourselves. So we're quite keen on helping companies implement this into their DNA from the outset. But yeah, we're very big on obviously supporting diversity and inclusion, and yeah, I'd love to hear from the guys in the chat, and yeah, feel free to reach out if we can be of any assistance.
Sorry, forgot to come off mute. That's great, Harvey. That's super. Thanks so much. And Damon, perhaps we can hear from you.
Hi everyone, I'm Damon, founder of British Design Fund. So we invest in early stage purpose-led product design and manufacturing companies. So our main point of difference is that all of our portfolio have hardware in them, let's say. So they're solving an important problem via some form of manufacturing. So if we invest in them, we will work to turn them into large scale manufacturing operations. So it's kind of not necessarily sort of cottage industry stuff. We like engineering businesses, we like businesses with IP, but we'll go pre-revenue. We can, the amounts we put in, sort of 150, 200,000 from our seed funds go in. So some people sort of think of us as pre-seed now that Series A's are so big. But yeah, and then we are launching a follow-on fund this year. But yeah, our main point of difference is it's everything's UK-based product design and manufacturing.
Fabulous. Just my phone goes off just when you don't want it to go. Anyhow, sorry about that. So yes, thanks so much for making the introductions. I want to now sort of ask some questions. We don't necessarily have to go around the room again, but please feel free to dive in, because I want to try and keep this sort of chatty and informal. And I don't want, because if I ask you a question, we'll probably all have the same answers. So, so from any of you, so what are you looking for when you're looking for a compelling investment opportunity? What are the things that you're looking for as investors? Please feel free to come off mute, any of you.
Mandy? I'll just very quick. I'm always on the deep tech side. Unlike basically what Damon is doing, we are looking into really something which is innovative. And we have, for example, a great case in the portfolio. This is the company which is totally pre-revenue, but solution was so sleek, and they managed to get like initial traction, and they were picked up, believe it or not, on internet by top listed US company in their field. And they approached them for acquisition on pre-revenue phase because the tech solution was so superb and exactly what they need. So we would be always sitting on the side of a deep tech. Even with the IoT, we simply don't do anything that contains manufacturing. This is type of the risk we are not looking at. Having said that, I started first because I wanted to say pre-work for the founders is actually super important to prepare and understand the investors you're approaching. Because, for example, if no matter how superior your solution in manufacturing is, if you would approach me and my team, we wouldn't really be able to fund it. But the investment thesis is not there. Plus, on the other side, we wouldn't be able even to push it through our network because our network looks into different direction. I think that a lot of founders are not putting enough of effort in understanding the investors they're approaching, so they get discouraged because they simply see investors like a huge ATM with the money. So I come, I type in, and then my presentation is amazing. So I think there is investor for every single industry, for every single solution. You just have to invest more in preparation and then approach it. And also the simpler explanation at the beginning it's better. We just recently onboarded another company which is doing something very unique and specific, enabling 5G communication. On the slide number 2, there was only a photo which basically showed me that thanks to their solution, which is deep tech solution, not only that 5G, but there is potential in wireless and satellite communications. And I was like immediately blown away. There was not a single word, and I know I want to be on board of it. So I'm just saying that if you talk to the right investor, they can understand very focused explanation. You don't have to go deep dive at early conversation. Of course, that will come with the due diligence. So that's my comment on this question. So
thanks. Mandy, do you have anything to mention on that?
Yeah, I love everything you just said, and I totally agree with the preparation before approaching investors as well. I think I'm very similar to yourself. The times when I met Damon, I was very focused on the deep tech side as well. Recently, I've been more focused on behavioral science, just because I tend to find there's a bit more diversity in gender in that space. So definitely interested in both sides of tech. A prime example of a business that I've managed to support, secure investment for is a company called Planera. They basically make biodegradable, flushable sanitary towels, and their whole mission is to redesign the way that we use household products, but making it more sustainable, especially products aligned to women, so that women are contributing to the climate emergency in a positive way. But it's not being done on the behavioral science side, it's done more on the deep tech side, and addressing that issue at the heart of the design. I think I love that proposition because think about the market size. Every woman in the world is contributing to this problem. So of course, it's a great opportunity to get involved in, and it's very scalable too. And I think, Emma, you've given lots of gems already around kind of the things that investors look for in your watch list, but that's kind of the areas that I'm focusing on, and of course in the sectors or the verticals that I mentioned earlier. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm focused on.
Fabulous, thank you. Damon, Harvey, do you want to add anything to that?
I think the only thing I would add to Emma, I think you mentioned it in your presentation, because we're quite sector agnostic, so I keep it sort of quite general, was keeping it simple. I think far too many founders try and cram everything into that opening pitch or that opening presentation, and sometimes it gets a little bit too confusing. I think keep it simple, stupid, and I think you'll do just fine, because I think capturing the investor's attention within the first 30 or 60 seconds, I think is very important.
Absolutely, yeah, and don't get complicated. If you can give it to an 8-year-old and they can understand it. I'm not saying investors are stupid, but they're time poor and they need to get the information that they need very quickly. And,
Yeah.
you know, we'll talk in a minute about, you know, the plethora of opportunities that you get thrown at your door. And if you
Yeah.
don't understand it, you could have the cure for cancer. But if it's buried in page 60 of some awfully worded document, you're never going to find it. So
Exactly.
sure. Damon, last comments on this bit.
Yeah, so probably to echo what everyone said, how I sort of explain it to people that if I chat to them before they put an application, I said, look, we've got, you know, for us, I think there's sort of 5-6 stages before you get investment from us. They're small but important. But most of those first sort of 2 or 3 are about spotting red flags. So it's like, imagine if you're applying for a very popular job and you send your CV in, right? If the HR or whoever the managers sat there with like 100 CVs, they're not actually looking for any positives there, right? They're looking to kind of get rid of stuff. And that's very much the first 2 steps that we go through here before it even goes out to my kind of committee is kind of looking for red flags. I mean, obviously spelling mistakes, stuff like that, that's just sloppiness, but really look at, like, we kind of assume that stuff's not there, most of them, but the red flags we're looking for are kind of like, you know, have they actually bothered to look at what our criteria is, you know? So like we're hardware and design led, so it's, you know, sometimes we get something that's software only that, you know, you don't even bother responding to those ones, but really it's kind of the big ones for us are sort of, you know, what is the importance of the problem you're addressing, right? Like you said earlier on in your presentation, Emma, it is ROI, right? We're all investors, we're representing investors, we're looking for a return on investment. Like how, you know, so it's not just about an important problem or addressing a compelling need. It's like, how big is that problem and that need? Like, is there some money to be made in here, and who else is kind of operating? And those are probably, before I start delving into, you know, detail around kind of like the IP, the competition, that's the one for me, and that should be really easy. And there is a sort of tried and tested format. If you're sending people teaser decks, right, just have that on page 2 or 3 or 6, like, you know, what is the problem? So, you know, why should I pay attention? And then, like, how big is it? Is it interesting to solve it? Well, is it the right, have you sent it to the right type of investor to solve that problem? Because maybe if it's not that scalable, maybe it should be an angel that can deal with different sort of returns. But for a fund, we're mandated to aim for certain returns, so we can't just do every important problem.
And return on investment is so key. I mean, obviously people say to me, well, putting your projections together, you know, who knows? And I said, no, but if you don't know, how can you possibly bring an investor along on that journey with you? Because they need to have an idea of what you're going to be having in your head. And return on investment for angel investors, I always say, you know, it's got to be 10 plus because it's so risky. But maybe funds and VCs, because you've demonstrated some traction, you know, perhaps they aren't looking for the massive return on investment, but still it has to be a credible amount that they're going to be putting the money in, that you know, you're hoping you're backing a winner, so to speak. So
I have just one comment, Emma, because you said about financials, and I have to admit that I like to see financials at the later stages of communication, because that allows me to understand how the founder thinks the business is going to function, not because I trust the numbers. And for example, SaaS business is absolutely, the financials look totally different than, for example, manufacturing or let's say another type of technology. So I do encourage people to do their homework. It is only don't send everything in the first email, because you should be very strategic what every step is going to bring to you. And that shows that you're in command of the process. And that shows to me as investor, you're going to be in command of a sales process. So I really like to see people who are strategic and they plan, you know, this is type of presentation that will hook you, that we start talking. And then I will open everything in my due diligence. So it's not bombarding you with everything like in a school, please give me the best mark. It's not about that. It's literally about how you tell me that you're going to run your business. This is how you run your funding process. I've done the homework. I know to summarize things. I know how to make them simple. And I know what I'm going to tell to you next. So it does really pay spending a kind of thinking. And in the end, you're selling your top asset, your company, your equity. So it's not like you are getting money for free. And the last comment, I saw the question, I think that every investor loves grants, because grants are equity non-delusional. They don't dilute the equity. On top of it, that gives you access to certain expert networks, and they're kind of a stamp of approval. So I love it. I see, for example, UK Innovate grant on the presentation, and I work on the board of the grants from the Swiss government. So I think it's really important to do that.
Absolutely, all very valid points, and yeah, and you're right, and it's coming down to de-risking it, and if you've gone and got some grant funding, like you say, somebody else has ticked this box and said, actually, this is probably a very good proposition. So no, that all goes to help. I suppose a question that a lot of people want to know is how do they find investors? That's what people always say to me. So how would you, I mean, obviously you must get a lot of inbound inquiries. Is there any places that you go and look for investment opportunities, or is there anything, they can make themselves position themselves better to find investors? Could you sort of share any thoughts around that?
I think the only thing that I'm not quite sure if it was on the list was accelerator and incubator programs.
It wasn't.
Yeah, because a lot of them are kind of like a hunting ground for investors to find, the next best idea, etc. So I definitely encourage you, if your solution aligns with any of their thesis, to apply for some of them. And just having a founder network that have moved to that next stage just before you is also very valuable, because founders are always happy to support one another, or they're usually happy to support one another, and they can definitely connect you to any investors that perhaps they've come across. So apart from that, I think a lot of the areas that you've already listed on your slide was probably where I'd signpost people to.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Mandy. Any other thoughts on this?
The only thing I would add, Emma, there's a platform called Investor Hunt, and they basically put all the investors that can be publicly seen on the internet in a well-organized platform, so you can search by industry, stage and things like that. So, I think they've got a free version, and you can obviously pay for it as well, which is I think $30 or $40 a month. But I think that's a good resource if you're looking for a certain type of investor and you want to categorize it when it comes to the industry or the sector that they invest into. I think that's quite a good tool to use as well.
Great tip. I've not heard of that, so thanks for sharing that.
Also having Crunchbase, I think it's also kind of similar. For like tiny amount, like a couple hundred of clicks, you basically get the access to full information about investors, including emails and names and portfolios and everything. So that would be also adding to this.
Sure. Excellent. Well, thanks for that, Damon. Do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, just it's sort of, as an early stage business, probably you never stop kind of trying to build your investor network. So, it's old school. It's out there. Going out to events. And you have to do. You get to a certain point where you've amassed a critical number of people useful people within your network that in itself feeds out, right? And you can get everything you need there. But when I was with some of my early companies before I set the fund up, you just be going to events, dishing out business cards, and it's about not necessarily can that person invest in my business, but do they know someone that knows someone? And you just keep on doing it, and you try and be of use to these people as well as you can be in your own way. So that's kind of there's a element of give and take, but a lot of it is networking, and I feel I must admit during sort of during the last couple of years when we've not had it's not been so easy to physically network. I felt very sorry for proper startups that haven't built their network. It's definitely been harder, but it's harder for everyone else. But now events are back on, and even things like this, like all of these are opportunities to go out there, see who's attending, drop an email. I always say the worst that happens, the worst is they'll just ignore you, right? That's probably the worst thing. Then they might just come back and say it's not appropriate. I mean, that's not so bad. But yeah, it's a non-stop process.
Absolutely, kissing lots of frogs. I would say you've got to go and find. But coming back to Dee's point, go and find out about the investor. And find out what floats their boat. Go and find out what they're interested in, and if you have something very specific to that industry, people know people, and building networks, like you say, when you're a startup, you've got to use a bit of shoe leather, and you've got to go to these events. I mean, if you're based in London, you could pretty much go to a pitching, well, maybe before COVID, you could go to a pitching event every morning and every afternoon and every evening, to be frank. But you know, it's about going out and talking to these people. But you're right, Damon. It's talking to a lot of people, so that's good. So what I suppose would be great to hear from you guys is I've sort of shared my thoughts on what they need to prepare. But what are the most important things that a founder needs to, when they're talking to an investor? What's the key things that they should be highlighting or bringing to your attention early doors? Anybody? D's always good.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking, you know, Emma, when you were talking, I think one of very important thing before we jump into what you should present to your investor is to understand what type of investors out there. So, for example, if you are a company who is not ready for hyper growth and maybe not being in control of your growth, etc., you shouldn't approach VC market, because VC market is all about the speed, about overnight growth, about things not under your control, about your company becoming a huge company and not anymore your baby. And that is something you should really understand. And there are many other options. And for example, family offices that also you mentioned, Emma, might be focused more on slower growth companies, outside of the VC sector, or maybe at some point, if you're lucky to bootstrap long enough, you can end up on private equity market, which is another pair of shoes. So that is really important to understand. So that will determine what you're going to show to your investors. So if you're coming to talk to VCs, you will have to show scalability and disruptiveness of your innovation, like on the front page. and it's not so much about your customers at that stage. Of course, we want to know that you understand in which part of the market you are, that you know who is going to use your product, but it is basically about the number of potential users. But if you're going on a slower growth path and maybe targeting to being bought by a certain well-functioning company when you reach like 100 million valuation or something like that, because 100 million doesn't really excite VCs. So that's totally different. And it excites me individually, but not the funds. And if you're going into that direction, then maybe you can focus more about your partnerships, your connections, your sales capacities, and how better you are of your competition. So I think that which type of investors you're approaching actually defines what you will be putting up front to the investor.
Absolutely, you're right. VCs, people go and talk to VCs when they're very early stage, and they always get disappointed that they say they're interested, but I said they're only watching you. They're not going to invest in you because VCs are there for that tree scaling capital. You know, once you know what you've buttoned down what your cost of acquisition is, your verticals, what you're going to be going for, because then they pump in money and they know it's going to go up because because you've done all the hard work improving the traction and proving that the sort of the market. So yeah, you're right, go and talk to them, but they generally won't invest at a very early stage. Any other thoughts on this? I'm conscious of time. We want to leave some time for some questions, and any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess in terms of what to look out for, I think there's a lot of funds that are available now, so a lot of people deploying capital. So traction for me seems to be something that is not as focused on as much. So I'd like to see how founders are doing pre-investment. How are they getting on with the little that they have? How much traction have they actually achieved to date? Have they actually achieved product market fit? Where are they at on the journey? And just see that they've actually made some progress before they ask me for capital to go and do other things. The team is a big one for me as well. Just kind of what expertise do they bring to the proposition that they are trying to get off the ground, and are they aligned? Most of the businesses that I see fail is because that kind of founder market fit doesn't quite work. So I definitely would love to see something along those lines. VCs definitely want to see that market size and that scalability of the potential 10x, as you mentioned. Angels too, but I used to actually work for another angel investor who was more interested in businesses getting to sustainability, not necessarily a lifestyle business, but a business that could start, breaking even and going into profit. So really depends, again, as Dee mentioned, who you're speaking to and understanding, their thesis and whether or not you align with that. So I think those are the kind of 3 areas that I would stipulate. Now, there are lots more, such as business model, etc. But I think those are the 3 that stand out for me at this moment.
Okay. Damon, Harvey, do you have any more thoughts on that? No? Okay. So Solène, do we have any questions?
Yes, we have a few questions. We've just had one come through, quite a long one, so bear with me. So how do you recommend navigating uncertainties is the first part. So this business is developing sustainable biodegradable materials to replace plastics. And for one of the products that is currently in development, they don't have a manufacturing partner identified and don't have the associated manufacturing costs available for the commercialization plan just yet. So they're seeking funding for scaling, and some of the work will be to identify these partners, but they're getting pushback for not having this upfront. So is there a way of pitching this to investors so it doesn't concern them?
Well, answer that one is so I'd say there's uncertainties in everything. So in your models or whatever you're using to produce your your plans, just list out all your assumptions, think it through. If they're at such an early stage, then it's probably not going to cost them a huge amount of money to kind of do that basic level of research to make sure, like, are they actually operating a space which should be operating, all those sort of things. But it's absolutely fine to put assumptions in. And I think, if you're very open and honest with investors, and maybe it's part of the ask is you say, look, this is where we've got to. I mean, it's hard to say from that question, but it's hard to tell quite what stage they're at. But it's totally understandable to not have, for instance, not have your bill of materials completely finalized or your tooling costs not yet figured out. But what you should have figured out is, like, is this an exciting market? Is there a gap? Is there an opportunity to exploit that gap? Is there some money to be made? And then, here's a list of things we haven't yet done, because maybe you do need some funding, but maybe it's like a different type of funding. It might be, like an incubator or an accelerator that gives you sort of 15, 20 grand to get you to the point you've done that, even that next little bit of research. Then you can go and chat to kind of sort of funds or whoever, or other sort of angels. But yeah, I think it's absolutely fine to have assumptions. Don't worry about it. And remember, at this stage, like investors we're very comfortable with risk, right? We want to understand it. We don't want, it's very, very odd if someone presents something to you that's a done deal and there's no risk. You're like, come on, we don't get 10x, right, for like having no risk. So risk is okay. Don't be scared of it. Just be completely upfront and honest. Which bits have you and haven't had a chance to do? And it's probably down to funding that you haven't done a lot of these things. But you say, look, this is an interesting market to go into, and it affects the price, right? It's kind of, the more this stuff you get ticked off, the price goes up. It gets more expensive for an investor.
Mm-hmm. Great, yeah. Did that answer the question? Or does anybody else want to put some thoughts to that?
The only thing I was gonna just some advice or signposting. There's an accelerator program that I used to lead called Central Research Laboratory, and they help with all of that. They help with manufacturing partners. They actually fly you out to Shenzhen, so you can actually meet large-scale manufacturing partners. And on site they have workshops as well. So you have technical engineers on the ground who can actually help you to perfect your prototype. Great businesses have come out of that accelerator program. For example, a company called Acceleron Energy, they make circular economy batteries, and they made their first prototype out of that. So I would definitely say connecting with organizations like that would be great. They also, I believe, attach a £5,000 grant to that too. So I know that the hardware space is very challenging when you're first getting off the ground. So any kind of support that you need in that space is really needed, and organizations like CRL would be excellent.
Thanks, Mandy.
I just want to pick up the question about lifestyle investments. I just wanted to say that by accident, I know a great fund in London, Felix Capital. They invest a lot in lifestyle. They invested, for example, in Goop of Gwyneth Paltrow. So I think that there is a number of, I think also Lightspeed. I was looking at that, and I think that there is a lot of investors in lifestyle businesses as well. It is a little bit tricky because they would probably be looking for someone to carry the brand, because lifestyle business is all about the branding. So just be cautious about that. But there are a number of them.
Was that Felix? Is that the one?
Felix Capital.
I'll just put it in.
Very good fund. Recently raised, I think, the number 3. I liked a lot what they're doing. Very supportive of founders, but also wouldn't be looking at super early stage. And they would be. I think they also financed Net-a-Porter, Goop. They're very much focused on and that's what I'm saying. When you're looking for investors, look for certain type of investor, and you will not fail.
There's a follow-up question to that, asking what does lifestyle actually mean?
In that, you mean lifestyle as in the sector, as opposed to the lifestyle business?
Funds, because lifestyle funds are actually investments into retirement, and this is the whole investment industry, but it is lifestyle as a sector, businesses, lifestyle.
Yeah, as opposed to lifestyle
businesses, which are not as investable.
No, which isn't as investable, because at the end of the day, it's never going to give you the return. It's not going to grow big enough. So I hope that answers that question.
Net-a-Porter is one of really good investments that brought a lot of return on investments to the investor.
No,
but it was
lifestyle as in your life, as in the founder's lifestyle. You know, just like
No. There is.
I know you don't mean that.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. No, don't worry. I think
all good. And there's a question here about other countries. So there's someone asking, how do you go about investing in startup based in other countries? In that case, Sri Lanka. So I guess commenting maybe broader on, do you invest from the UK in other countries, or how do people go about finding funds in their own country and all of that?
Does anybody want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that, Emma. I mean, we're quite agnostic when it comes to the location where we invest. But yeah, so we're always open to receiving deals across the globe, and our investor network reaches globally as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just about getting. I think Google's your best friend here. LinkedIn as well is a great resource. I think, just Googling, early stage investors or angel investors in India or Sri Lanka, I think, would probably give you enough results to get going. Like I said, our core focus is the UK, and we will look at companies globally. But I think just getting on Google or LinkedIn and typing in angel investor and then highlighting the location as Sri Lanka, I'm sure you'll find a good few thousand people that will consider looking and investing into those types of companies. But like I said, Google's your friend. So anything you don't know, I think there's reams of information online these days that you can find.
Yeah. I think it comes back to, all of your points is actually knowing your investor too. So, if you have an investor that is likes US fintech companies, or, you'll find the type of people that you're wanting to work with and do some research on them. And you might find a Sri Lankan based investor that actually resides in the UK because the tax is better. I don't know, there are all sorts of things, but that you can go and look for these people. And like Harvey says, Google is your best friend, and LinkedIn.
Great, thank you. We have a question here, and it's in 2 parts, so I'm going to merge it together. But it's around giving examples of what you want to see in terms of traction and product to market fit. And this is related to a med tech startup in this specific example. So Mihir says he's working on a hardware, non-invasive and easy to use way to get patients off a ventilator quicker. The difficulty he's working on now is collecting the data to show that this works and provides clinical benefits, as it requires the product to have gone through very thorough testing. Is this a stage where funds might be useful to help with the product development and partnering with other organizations to collect the data to prove the solution is useful? Or is it better at this stage to focus on grants and in angel investment, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to. So from with it being a hardware one again, so I'd say not unusual. We get, med tech stuff is usually, there's a big part of the use of funds is the clinical trials, if it's that level of a medical device. But I would say, and I assume as well that there will be grants that business can get. It'd be very unusual, let's say, if there weren't grants. It's kind of what a lot of them are, those innovation grants are set up for. But sometimes you do fall between the gaps and you don't quite, kind of meet the criteria for a certain award. So I would go back to, if I was seeing something in this space, I'd go back to kind of like, how do you know it's really needed? Fair enough, you're not going to have all the clinical trials and the data from it, but I would assume, like, how do they know that there's this gap in the market and how big is it? Because that's the sort of thing you can pull together. So you can, I was talking to someone last week, the problem is solving a problem that paramedics have, and they've talked to the paramedics, so they've got, and you can do these things. There's no barrier there, but they haven't done the clinical trials yet. That's all yet to come. But they proved enough to me that this was an important problem. It was a problem of scale that should be solved, and there was money to be made in it. And the IP was, there was a plan where I could see where the IP would come from as well. But fair enough, hadn't been trialed. But it's risk. Risk is okay. But.
So prove there's a problem and prove the problem is worth solving, and then everything else can follow, and you can still find interest.
And I think investors are completely aware, that medtech does take a lot of money. It's very financially resourced, and in getting those grants sometimes can be really the difference between unlocking, because your grants, typically Innovate UK grants specifically, have only 70% funding. So if it's £1 million project to do the testing, which is not unreasonable, you're still going to have to find that 300. But if you go and get 700 from a grant body, the investment makes the decision easier. Sorry,
and I wanted to say the last thing: be mindful of your cap table. Because you really have a long way to go. So busy cap tables are kind of difficult to manage at the later stages. So this is something which might actually kind of not well structured, and busy cap table can actually cut your chances of getting the proper funding at the later stages. So just needed to mention that. Be mindful of your cap table.
Very good point, Dave. Very good point.
Yes, actually, we touched on that, didn't we, in the panel last week as well with a founder. So that's a very good point to remind ourselves. We can end on this question. I won't read the full text. I apologize, because it's quite a long one description, but it's basically a business in the fashion, disrupting the fast fashion industry. But the question, I think, can apply to a lot of different cases. So when do you think it's best to start networking with VC investors? Is that before any funding rounds, or is it better to attend all these networking and pitching events when you're actually ready for funding?
I feel like even joining sessions like this, where you can start pulling the brains off of different investors, it's probably a good time to start understanding the mindset of what VCs are looking for, to get that kind of soft advice. And then whilst you're actually starting to build the proposition, joining organizations like I mentioned, incubators or accelerators, who can actually help you on the business growth side, at the same time invite investors into a safe space for you. So you're not necessarily having to pitch to them. You can still pick their brains and get their candid feedback. So it's, you're, as Dee mentioned, you're not kind of killing your first shot because you've got that soft intro. And And then at that point, you have enough advice, in my opinion, to know when you should be having that proper conversation with them. And then you should have a bit of a network as well at that point to then start approaching them. So I would say, you know, attending these events and joining those types of organizations is probably your better bet, just because there is that kind of first impressions thing as well. If you're already going to shoot to an investor, you know, particularly a VC, and they don't have the time, or they don't understand your concept, you're not quite fully baked, you could potentially miss that opportunity. So that's the advice I would give.
Thanks, Mandy.
Great, thank you. Perfect. Well, we're just on time with that, Emma. So if you want to round us up.
Sure. Okay, perfect. Well, you know, thank you, a huge thank you to all the panel members. You've given fabulous insight. And like I say, you don't necessarily want to hear from me, you want to hear from the people that live it, breathe it every day. So huge thank you to you all. And yeah, hopefully it's been useful to people to gain an insight from these investors that have shared their thoughts today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
lunch.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.